Useless. My daughter's voice cut across the table like a knife sharp enough to make the roast chicken go cold in an instant. The dining room fell silent. The oak table groaned under mismatched plates, a steaming bowl of mashed potatoes, and a golden cornbread brought over by my neighbor. It should have been a warm Sunday dinner. Instead, it turned into a public trial with me as the defendant. She leaned back in her chair, swirling red wine in a crystal glass I could never afford, and sneered. This old house won't last forever. Sell it. Move into a nursing home. Stop being a burden. Her husband gave a low chuckle. My grandson stared at his phone as if the screen could save him from the shame in the room. My hand shook as I reached for my water. My face burned hotter than the oven still humming in the kitchen. Decades of sacrifice, years of giving up what I wanted so she could have more, and all that was left for me now was one word: useless. I wanted to shout back to remind her who kept this family alive when no one else would. Instead, silence strangled me. She smirked, certain she had won. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps on the front door shattered the tension. "Who the hell is that?" she snapped. I rose slowly, my heart pounding against my ribs. The door creaked open to reveal a man in a gray suit, a black leather briefcase in his hand. His voice was calm, but it landed like a hammer. "It's time. I've brought the documents." The room froze. My daughter's smile vanished. What documents, and why appear tonight right after she humiliated me in my own home? Would you slam the door shut or let him in? My name is Gloria Bennett, 72 years old, retired elementary school teacher. If you've ever passed through Dayton, Ohio, maybe your child or grandchild once sat in my classroom, their little hands wrapped around pencils while I guided them through the alphabet. For decades, I gave myself to other people's children, then came home to raise my own. And yet here I was being told by my only daughter that I was useless. The word kept echoing in my head louder than the ticking clock on the wall, louder than the hum of the refrigerator, louder even than the laughter that had died so suddenly at the table. I stared at Vanessa, my Vanessa. The baby I had carried through a winter of unpaid heating bills, the teenager I once stayed up nights tutoring in math so she could keep her grades high, the young woman I sent off to college even when it meant working double shifts just to cover tuition. That same girl now sat across from me, sipping from a glass that glittered in the candlelight, her lips twisted into a smirk that felt colder than any winter I had endured. "Vanessa," I whispered, my throat tight. Why would I? She snapped, cutting me off before I could finish. "Because it's true, Mom. Look at you. You can't even fix a leaking faucet. You forget your pills half the time. This house is falling apart, and so are you. You're clinging to the past like it's worth something. But it's not. Not anymore." Her husband, Darren, snorted, shoving a forkful of chicken into his mouth as if this were entertainment. "She's right, Gloria," he said casually, not even looking at me. "Selling this place would solve a lot of problems. It's big, outdated. Who needs it? You'd be better off somewhere. Smaller, safer. As if I were a child who needed babysitting. As if I hadn't spent decades keeping everyone else safe." I looked around the table, desperate for an ally. My grandson Ethan wouldn't even meet my eyes. At 16, he was lost in the glow of his phone screen, earbuds dangling, pretending not to hear. My neighbor, Mrs. Carter, shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her cornbread untouched. She had seen enough family drama in her lifetime to know when not to intervene. And so I sat there utterly alone, surrounded by people I had once called family. People who were supposed to love me, protect me, honor me. Instead, I felt stripped bare, every sacrifice I had ever made laid out for mockery. I thought back to the nights when my husband, God, rest his soul, was away on trucking jobs, and it was just me and Vanessa. Nights when I skipped dinner so she could have seconds. Days when I patched my shoes with tape so she could walk to school in a new pair. I never asked for thanks, never once, but I never imagined I would end up here disposable in my own home. The air in the room thickened. Even the walls seemed to lean closer, listening, absorbing my shame. Vanessa leaned forward now, tapping her perfectly manicured nails against the table. "Face it, Mom. You don't belong here anymore. We can list this house next week. The market's hot. You could get a good price, and with that money..." Well, we'd make sure you're taken care of. Taken care of. The words dripped with poison. She wasn't talking about taking care of me, she was talking about taking care of my money. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice not to crack. This house is all I have left of your father. He built those bookshelves. He planted the maple tree out front. Every brick. Oh, please, she interrupted, rolling her eyes. Dad's been gone for years. Stop clinging to ghosts. You're embarrassing yourself. The cruelty in her tone was worse than the words themselves. Darren smirked. Ethan sank deeper into his chair. Mrs. Carter dabbed at her mouth with a napkin, her eyes glassy with pity. And me, I sat frozen, staring at the chipped edge of my plate, wishing it could swallow me whole. I had spent a lifetime teaching children kindness, patience, respect. And my own daughter, my flesh and blood, was shredding me in front of neighbors and family without a flicker of shame. For the first time in my life, I wondered if maybe I was useless. The thought crept in like a thief, whispering that maybe I had nothing left to offer. Maybe she was right. Maybe my time had passed. But then my gaze shifted to the hallway closet. Behind the coats hidden in a fireproof lockbox sat the one thing Vanessa didn't know about. My fingers twitched against my lap. If only she knew. If only she understood that her words weren't the final nail in my coffin. She thought she had won, but I wasn't done yet. And when the knock came at the door, the man in the gray suit with the briefcase, something inside me stirred. Because I knew what he carried wasn't just paper, it was power. And power has a way of changing everything. I sat back down slowly, my body stiff, as if even the chair itself no longer wanted to hold me. The silence at the table stretched long and heavy, broken only by the clink of Vanessa's fork against her plate. She pushed her food around, not even eating, and said casually, "You know, Mom, Darren and I were talking. If you sold this house, we could finally put a down payment on that property near Columbus. Big plans, good return. It would be a smart move for all of us. For all of us." My chest tightened. Not once did she say for you, Mom. Darren leaned back, his arm slung across the back of Vanessa's chair. "Gloria, I've got a guy who could come out tomorrow to appraise the place. Cash buyers are everywhere right now. Honestly, it's perfect timing." I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Perfect timing. My husband's photo still hung on the wall behind me. His kind brown eyes staring out from a wooden frame we bought at a flea market 30 years ago. The wallpaper he pasted up himself was faded now, but I could still see the crooked lines where he hadn't measured right. Every imperfection was a memory. How could they sit there and talk about selling my memories like cattle at an auction? Mrs. Carter cleared her throat. "Well, it's still her home," she murmured gently, as if daring to poke a lion. But Vanessa's glare shut her down instantly. "Stay out of this," Vanessa snapped. "You don't know what it's like watching someone spiral." Spiral, as if I were some addict or lunatic, not her mother. I wanted to shout, "I'm not spiraling, I'm surviving." But the words stuck. I'd swallowed too many insults, too many disappointments. My voice had grown rusty from silence. Instead, my mind drifted back to the nights I worked overtime, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead while I graded spelling tests and lesson plans. I'd come home exhausted, my feet aching only to find Vanessa asleep on the couch with a blanket slipping off her shoulders. I would cover her up, kiss her forehead, whisper promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "I'll take care of you," I used to say. And now she sat across from me, plotting how to take everything from me. Ethan finally looked up from his phone. For a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, he would defend me, but he only sighed. "Mom's right, Grandma. This house is old. It smells weird. Maybe you should, move somewhere smaller." The words pierced deeper than any knife. My own grandson, who once ran through these hallways with sticky fingers, who I used to rock to sleep while his parents partied, was siding against me. I pressed a hand to my chest, steadying my breath. My heart felt too heavy, my body too frail. They had already buried me, and I was still sitting right there. Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes sharp, her voice low but lethal. "Look, Mom, you can fight me, but in the end, you'll lose. You can't afford the taxes forever. You can't fix the plumbing. You can barely climb the stairs. Sooner or later, this house will kill you. This house will kill you." Her words echoed in my ears louder than the creak of the floorboards, louder than the howl of the wind outside. I felt the room spin. For the first time, I wondered if maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't belong here anymore. Maybe my time was already over, and I was just clinging to bricks and dust. But then my eyes drifted again, back to the closet down the hall, to the fireproof lockbox hidden behind coats and boots, to the truth I had kept locked away for years. My lips pressed together. They thought I was powerless. They thought I had nothing left. But they didn't know the whole story. They didn't know about the papers, the ones that could change everything. And just as that thought settled, the sound came again, 3 sharp knocks that rattled the door frame. Not a neighbor, not a salesman. Something else. Darren frowned. "Who the hell is knocking this late?" Vanessa scowled, pushing back from the table. Probably some idiot with the wrong address. But I knew better. I could feel it in my bones. I rose slowly, ignoring their protests. My knees ached, but something inside me pushed me forward. My hand trembled on the doorknob, and when I pulled it open, the man in the gray suit stood there again, his briefcase gleaming under the porch light. He didn't smile. He didn't ask permission. He only said the words that made the blood drain from Vanessa's face. "Mrs. Bennett, it's time." The room behind me fell silent, as if even the walls held their breath. Because deep down, I knew this was the moment everything would begin to change. The man in the gray suit stepped over the threshold without waiting for an invitation, his polished shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. He looked around the dining room as if he had walked into a courtroom, his eyes sharp behind square-framed glasses. Vanessa shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. "Excuse me, who are you? You can't just barge in here." The man adjusted his tie and spoke in a calm, even tone. "My name is Mr. Harris. I represent Mrs. Bennett. She knows why I'm here." All eyes turned to me. My pulse hammered in my ears. Represent me? I hadn't said a word. I hadn't even told Vanessa about the calls I'd received these past few weeks. "What is this, Mom?" Vanessa demanded, her voice dripping with suspicion. "What's going on?" I swallowed hard. For once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. Instead, I felt the room shift, the balance tipping just slightly in my favor. Mr. Harris placed his briefcase on the table right on top of Vanessa's untouched plate. He snapped the locks open. The metallic click sliced through the silence. "These are documents your mother asked me to prepare," he explained, pulling out a stack of thick manila folders. "Legal documents, property records, financial statements." Vanessa's face paled, then flushed red. "Property records, financial statements. For what?" "She doesn't have anything. She's broke. She's enough." I interrupted, my voice stronger than I expected. It startled even me. "You've said enough tonight, Vanessa." The room froze. My daughter blinked, stunned that I'd cut her off. Darren leaned forward, squinting at the folders. Ethan finally pulled out an earbud, curiosity tugging at his teenage indifference. Mr. Harris continued sliding one of the folders toward me. "Mrs. Bennett, do you want me to explain these now or later?" I hesitated. A part of me wanted to wait to savor the suspense, but another part, the part that had been stepped on, mocked, belittled, wanted the truth to slice through the air right now. "Now," I said firmly. Vanessa slammed her palm on the table. "This is ridiculous, Mom. What are you even doing? What did you sign? What is this nonsense?" Mr. Harris ignored her tantrum, flipping open the folder to reveal page after page stamped with official seals. "This is proof of ownership," he said, his finger tapping the top of the first page. "Your mother is not only the rightful owner of this house, but she also holds majority shares in a real estate investment trust, shares that are valued in the millions." The words hung in the air like a bomb. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the refrigerator seemed to go quiet. Vanessa shook her head violently. No, this is a mistake. Mom doesn't know anything about investments. She can barely use a smartphone. You're lying." Mr. Harris calmly closed the folder. "I assure you the documents are real. I've been her attorney for the last 5 years. We've kept everything confidential at her request." Vanessa's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Darren shifted uncomfortably, his confidence cracking. Ethan stared at me wide-eyed, as if seeing his grandmother for the first time. I felt the weight on my chest begin to lift. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one shrinking in my chair. It was Vanessa. It was Darren. I leaned forward, my hands no longer trembling. "You think I'm useless. You think I've got nothing left. You couldn't be more wrong." Vanessa's face twisted with fury, but I caught a flicker of fear in her eyes too, and that fear gave me strength. The papers were more than just numbers and seals. They were proof that I had built a life far bigger than she ever knew, proof that I wasn't finished, proof that age hadn't stolen my power, it had sharpened it. And as Mr. Harris folded his hands neatly on the table, I realized something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I still had the strength to fight back. Vanessa snatched one of the folders off the table, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. This can't be real. Mom doesn't even know how to log into online banking. How could she possibly manage stocks and shares? I almost laughed, though my throat was too tight. For years, she'd mistaken my silence for ignorance, my gentleness for weakness. She never once considered that I might have planned for a future she couldn't see. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses. "Your mother has been very deliberate with her affairs. She consulted me regularly. She made investments at the right time, and she's done quite well. Extremely well, in fact." Darren leaned forward, his eyes narrowing on the pages. How well his voice had a greedy edge, the kind I'd heard before at poker nights when someone thought they were holding a winning hand. "Enough," Mr. Harris replied calmly, "that your family's financial stability could be secured for generations. If, of course, her wishes are respected." Vanessa's jaw dropped. She turned toward me, her face pale but burning with rage. "You kept this from me. From us all those years, you acted like we were barely scraping by. Do you know how much easier things could have been if you had just told me I raised my chin?" My voice was steady now, almost frighteningly so. "Easier for who, Vanessa?" "For you. So you could bleed me dry faster." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The look on her face told me I had hit the mark. I glanced at Darren, who still hadn't taken his eyes off the documents. His lips curled into a thin smile, the kind that made my stomach twist. "Gloria," he said smoothly, "this is impressive." "Really? But you have to understand, money like this can be complicated. Vanessa and I, we know how to handle investments. We could help you, protect you." There it was, the pitch. He thought he was slick, but I could see straight through him. "I don't need your protection," I said, my words sharp as glass. "I've been protecting myself a long time, Darren. Longer than you've even been in this family." His smile faltered just a flicker, but I caught it. Mrs. Carter, who had been sitting quietly this whole time, finally spoke. "Goodness, Gloria, I had no idea. You always seemed so modest, so—" She hesitated, her voice softening. "So ordinary." I turned to her with a faint smile. "That's the thing about ordinary people. Sometimes we carry extraordinary secrets." Vanessa shoved the folder back across the table, her voice shrill. "This changes nothing. You can't handle all this paperwork. You'll forget deadlines, you'll make mistakes. It's only a matter of time before someone takes advantage of you. You need me. You still need me." I stood then, pushing my chair back. My knees ached, but I ignored the pain. "No, Vanessa, that's what you don't understand. I don't need you. Not for this. Not anymore." The words tasted sweet on my tongue like honey after years of bitterness. Ethan finally looked up, pulling his earbuds out completely. His eyes darted from me to his mother, confusion painted across his young face. "Mom, maybe Grandma's not as helpless as you said." Vanessa's head whipped toward him. "Ethan, stay out of this." But the boy didn't look away from me, and in his eyes I saw something I hadn't expected: respect. Just a flicker, but it was there. I straightened my shoulders, the weight of humiliation that had smothered me earlier, lifting bit by bit. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was standing tall. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. "Mrs. Bennett, There are additional matters we should discuss privately, but if you wish, I can continue in front of your family." Vanessa spat. "No, this is insane. Mom, don't listen to him. He's manipulating you. I'm your daughter. I'm the one you can trust." Her desperation filled the room, but I didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eye. "I raised you, Vanessa. I trusted you for 42 years, and tonight you told me I was nothing. Useless. Do you really think you're the one I should trust now?" Her lips quivered. Darren shifted uncomfortably. Ethan's mouth fell open. The silence that followed was heavy, but not suffocating, not anymore. For the first time in years, the silence was mine. And in that silence, hope bloomed. The candles on my birthday cake flickered weakly, 12 tiny flames struggling against the draft from the open window. 73 years. That was the number scrawled in bright blue icing, but the room didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a trial. Vanessa had organized the party, at least that's what she called it. I knew better. This wasn't a party. This was a performance staged carefully for friends, neighbors, and extended family to watch her shine while I played the part of the fragile, fading mother. The dining room buzzed with polite chatter, plates of hors d'oeuvres passed around, glasses clinking. My house had never been so full, yet I'd never felt so alone. I sat at the head of the long oak table, the birthday cake in front of me, and tried to ignore the stares. "Make a wish, Mom." Vanessa cooed, her voice sugar-sweet, but her eyes cold. She stood behind me with one manicured hand on my shoulder, gripping a little too hard. I drew in a breath, ready to blow out the candles. But before I could, she slid a thick envelope onto the table in front of me. The room hushed. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely carrying over the silence. Vanessa leaned closer, her smile practiced for the audience. "A gift, Mom. Just sign these papers, and you won't have to worry about a thing anymore." A ripple of murmurs moved around the table. I glanced down at the envelope, my stomach tightening. I pulled the papers out with trembling fingers, pages dense with legal text lines and lines of clauses. My eyes caught on a single phrase, transfer of property ownership. My chest constricted. This wasn't a gift. It was a trap. Vanessa. I whispered, panic prickling my skin. "What is this?" She patted my hand gently as if I were a child. "It's for your own good, Mom. Darren and I will handle everything. You can relax finally. Just sign and all this burden will be lifted." "Burden?" I echoed, my voice breaking. "This house is not a burden. It's my life. Your father." "Oh, stop," she snapped suddenly, her tone hard enough to cut the air. "Dad's been gone for years. You keep clinging to his memory like it's worth something. It's pathetic, Mom. You can't keep living in the past." Gasps broke out around the table. Mrs. Carter's fork clattered against her plate. Ethan looked up from his phone, his face stricken. I felt my cheeks flush, my throat tighten. They were all watching me, waiting to see if I would cave. The cake in front of me, candles still burning, seemed to mock me. What kind of wish could I possibly make now? Darren cleared his throat, stepping into the spotlight. "Folks," he said with an easy smile, "this is just a formality. Gloria's health isn't what it used to be. The house is too much for her. We all know it. We're just trying to make sure she's safe, taken care of." Safe. Taken care of. The same poisonous words he'd used before. I looked down at the pen Vanessa had slid across the table toward me. The shiny black barrel gleamed under the chandelier's light as if daring me to pick it up. My hand hovered over it. My heart raced. Around me, whispers filled the room. Some guests nodded as if agreeing with Vanessa. Others looked away, embarrassed for me. I could feel the walls closing in. The humiliation was complete. My own birthday had become the stage for my public undoing. "Go on, Mom," Vanessa urged, her voice low but sharp. "Sign. Don't make this harder than it has to be." The pen touched my fingertips. My breath hitched. For a moment, I thought I might do it. Just give in. And the fight let her win. Then my gaze drifted across the table. Mr. Harris sat quietly in the corner, his briefcase resting by his chair. He hadn't said a word all evening, but his eyes were fixed on me, steady and calm. And in that moment, I remembered the folders, the documents, the truth I had buried away, waiting for this exact day. I pulled my hand back from the pen. Vanessa's smile faltered. Not yet, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The silence that followed was louder than any outburst could have been. For the first time that night, I wasn't just the old woman at the head of the table. I was something else entirely. Something Vanessa wasn't prepared for. The silence after my refusal cracked like thin ice. Vanessa's hand froze mid-gesture, her manicured nails gripping the pen she'd tried to force into mine. For the first time that evening, her perfect smile wavered. Not yet, she repeated, her voice sharp, trembling on the edge of rage. What does that even mean, Mom? You're confused. You don't understand what's good for you. I understand perfectly, I said quietly, though my heart pounded like a drum inside my chest. Vanessa's face darkened. This is ridiculous, she snapped, turning to the room as if recruiting allies. She doesn't know what she's doing. Everyone can see it. She's 73, for God's sake. She forgets things, she leaves the stove on, That's enough. Mrs. Carter interjected suddenly, her voice trembling but firm. All heads turned toward her. Gloria is not senile. She's lived in this house longer than you've been alive, Vanessa. Don't you dare talk to her like she's some child. A murmur ran through the guests, some nodding, some whispering behind their hands. Vanessa flushed the humiliation of being challenged in front of her own audience, fueling her fury. Darren leaned forward, placing a steadying hand on his wife's arm, though his voice was oily and calculated. Let's not get emotional, he said smoothly. This is about safety, responsibility. Gloria, you've been struggling. It's natural. We just want to help. This isn't about control. It's about love. Love, I repeated, bitterness dripping from the word. You call this love? Forcing me to sign away my home on my birthday. His smile faltered. Vanessa stepped closer, her heels clicking against the hard wood floor. She bent down, her face inches from mine. Her eyes glittered with cold fire. Sign the papers, Mom. Do it, or this whole party, this whole family falls apart right here, right now. Gasps broke out around the table. Ethan muttered under his breath, Mom, stop, but she ignored him. I sat frozen, every muscle in my body trembling. This was it, the breaking point. They had me cornered, my dignity stripped bare in front of neighbors, relatives, even my own grandson. And then, just as the weight of it threatened to crush me, Mr. Harris cleared his throat. The sound was soft, almost polite, but it sliced through the chaos like a knife. All heads turned toward him. He rose slowly, buttoning his gray suit jacket, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm raging in the room. If I may, he said, his voice low but commanding, I believe there are some important details being overlooked here. Vanessa whirled on him. Stay out of this. You're just some lawyer she hired to make her feel important. This doesn't concern you. On the contrary, he replied evenly, reaching for his briefcase. It concerns me very much, because I am legally bound to represent Mrs. Bennett's interests, and those interests are being threatened tonight. The briefcase snapped open, the metallic click echoing louder than the whispers around the table. He pulled out a folder, thick and heavy, and laid it carefully on the table beside the untouched birthday cake. This, he said, sliding it forward, is proof of ownership. This house and several other assets belong solely to Mrs. Bennett. Any attempt to coerce her signature under duress is not only unethical but illegal. Vanessa's face drained of color. Other assets, she stammered, her bravado cracking. Mr. Harris opened the folder, revealing stamped pages filled with legal seals. Yes, assets your mother has chosen not to disclose publicly until now. Properties, investments, accounts, all protected under her name. The room fell silent. Darren leaned closer, his greedy eyes flicking over the pages, but Mr. Harris snapped the folder shut before he could touch them. Vanessa's voice wavered, desperate now. This is some trick. Mom doesn't have anything. She never had money. She's just useless. I cut in, my voice steady, resonating through the stunned silence. Her lips froze around the words she hadn't dared to say again. The guests shifted uncomfortably, their pity for me now turning into curiosity and suspicion toward her. I straightened in my chair, my spine no longer bowed. You've spent years treating me like a burden, Vanessa. Tonight you tried to humiliate me in front of everyone I know, but you forgot one thing. Her eyes darted nervously. What I'm not finished. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. For the first time, Vanessa didn't have a comeback. Darren's smile slipped into a grimace. Ethan stared at me wide-eyed, whispering, "Grandma," as if he were meeting me for the first time. Mr. Harris closed his briefcase and looked directly at me. "Shall I continue?" "Mrs. Bennet," I nodded slowly, never breaking eye contact with my daughter. "Please do." And with that, the balance of power shifted. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses and placed a second folder on the table. The weight of it made the wood groan. Every eye in the room locked onto him the way churchgoers watch a preacher before a revelation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone deliberate. "Tonight is meant to honor Mrs. Bennet. Instead, I've observed attempts to pressure her into relinquishing her home. That ends now." Vanessa slammed her hand down on the table, her voice shrill. "You don't get to lecture me in my own family's house." Mr. Harris raised a single brow. "Correction. Her house. Legally. Solely. Irrevocably." The room rippled with whispers. Darren leaned forward, sweat glistening at his temple. "Let's not make this a circus. Gloria, we all know you can't handle finances on your own. It's too complicated." "Funny," Mr. Harris interrupted smoothly, "since Mrs. Bennet has managed quite well for over a decade. These documents show consistent management of her estate." In fact, he opened the folder, revealing crisp statements stamped with banking seals. "She's the majority shareholder in Bennett Gray Holdings, a real estate trust currently valued at over $12 million. The words detonated like a bomb. Glasses clinked as someone dropped a drink. A cousin gasped audibly. Vanessa staggered back a step, her voice breaking. No, that's impossible. She was a teacher. Teachers don't make millions." I rose slowly from my chair, gripping its back for support. My knees wobbled, but my voice was steel. "Teachers don't make millions, Vanessa. But teachers who sacrifice, invest carefully, and never stop planning, they can build a future. A future you thought I was too stupid to have." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For once, Vanessa had no script, no rehearsed cruelty. Ethan spoke up, his teenage voice cracking. "Grandma, you're rich." His eyes were wide, not with greed but awe. I managed a small smile. "Rich in more ways than money, Ethan. But yes, I am not the helpless woman your mother paints me to be." Vanessa spun toward Mr. Harris, her face red, her voice nearly hysterical. "You're lying. She never told me. She never told anyone. This is some scam." Mr. Harris didn't flinch. He pulled out a notarized letter, sliding it across the table. Signed 5 years ago. Witnessed. Filed. All legal. Darren reached for it, but I slammed my palm down before he could touch it. My voice, sharp as broken glass, cut through the room. "Don't you dare!" The room gasped. Darren froze, staring at me like he'd just seen me for the first time. "You think I've been blind?" I continued, my voice rising. "You think I haven't noticed the way you circle me like a vulture? Smiling, charming, pretending to help, while all you wanted was to strip me of what I built. Not anymore." Vanessa's hands balled into fists. "You've been hiding money all these years while we struggled, while I begged you for help with bills, with tuition." "Yes," I said flatly, "because I knew what you would do with it. Because I knew greed when I saw it even in my own daughter's eyes." The words landed like a slap. Vanessa reeled, her face crumpling between rage and humiliation. Around the table, no one spoke. Neighbors, cousins, even Ethan all stared at me, their eyes wide, their whispers muted. For decades, I had been the quiet matriarch, the woman who cooked, cleaned, taught, and smiled. Now they saw me differently. Now they saw the truth. Mr. Harris closed the folder with a firm snap. "Mrs. Bennet has secured her estate. There is nothing you can take without her consent. Tonight's little performance only proves why her precautions were necessary." Vanessa collapsed into a chair, her body shaking. Darren rubbed her shoulder, but his own expression was pale, his calculations failing him. I stepped forward, my hand brushing across the cake, still waiting for me to blow out the candles. The flames wavered, reflecting in Vanessa's tear-filled eyes. "You wanted me to sign away my life tonight?" I said, my voice low but fierce. "Instead, you just watched me take it back." Vanessa covered her face with her hands. Darren muttered something under his breath, but no one listened. For the first time in years, I felt taller, stronger alive. The room wasn't watching Vanessa anymore. The room was watching me. And in that spotlight, I realized the game had finally changed. The room buzzed with whispers, chairs creaking as people shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa sat collapsed in her chair, her face blotched with shame and fury. But my eyes were on Darren. He hadn't denied a word Mr. Harris said. He hadn't defended her. He sat there, with his hands folded tightly in his lap, his jaw tense, eyes fixed on the floor as though he were calculating his next move. "Darren," I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "How long have you known?" He didn't look up. "Long enough," he muttered. Vanessa's head snapped toward him, eyes wide with betrayal. "You knew, and you let me take the fall. You let them all think this was me alone." Darren leaned back, finally raising his gaze. His eyes were cold hard. "Vanessa, I warned you not to forge her name. I told you it would backfire. But you wouldn't listen. You never listen." Gasps fluttered across the room. For years they had been a united front, him the smooth talker, her the sharp tongue. Seeing them fracture in front of everyone was like watching glass shatter. "You're unbelievable," Vanessa hissed, her voice cracking. "You used me. You stood by while I used you." Darren interrupted, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "No, Vanessa. You were greedy all on your own. You dragged me into this mess. I tried to play along, tried to keep it under control, but you—" He jabbed a finger toward her. "You turned it into something bigger, something reckless." The tension between them crackled electric and raw. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Mr. Harris cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention back. "Mr. Bennett," he said smoothly, "it's interesting you admit to awareness of the fraud. You realize that makes you complicit." Darren's face paled. I didn't sign anything. I didn't touch the paperwork. But you benefited from it, Mr. Harris countered. He lifted another document from his folder, flipping it open. "Loans taken out against this house. Where did the money go?" "Several large wire transfers into a joint account with your name on it, Mr. Bennett." Darren's eyes darted to the page, panic flashing across his face. "That doesn't prove. It proves plenty," Mr. Harris said firmly. "If this goes to court, you'll both be standing trial." The guests erupted into shocked whispers, some covering their mouths, others shaking their heads in disgust. Mrs. Carter muttered under her breath, "Thieves in their own mother's house." Vanessa's voice was a shriek now. "You liar! You were in on it the whole time." Darren slammed his palm on the table, his calm mask finally cracking. "And what choice did I have?" "You pushed me into it, Vanessa. You couldn't stand the idea of waiting, of letting your mother live out her life in peace. You wanted it all now, so don't you dare pretend this was my plan." Their fight raged like a storm, accusations flying each word, ripping away the image of a perfect couple they had tried so hard to maintain. But underneath the chaos, I felt something else rising, power. For the first time, their voices weren't drowning me out. They were revealing themselves, greedy, desperate, small. And I was standing taller, stronger with every word they hurled. I stepped forward, my hands steady on the back of my chair. "Enough," I said, my voice cutting sharp through their screaming. The room hushed instantly. "You both used me, lied to me, stole from me. And still you had the nerve to call me useless. But tell me," I leaned across the table, staring straight into their faces, "who's really useless now?" Their silence was answer enough. Mr. Harris nodded toward me, then reached into his briefcase once more. "Mrs. Bennett, there is one more file. You asked me to keep it sealed until circumstances demanded. Given what we've just uncovered, I believe it's time." My heart skipped. I had almost forgotten. The second envelope, the one that could cut deeper than anything else tonight. He laid it gently in front of me. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing page after page of notarized documents stamped in official ink. My throat tightened as I read the header, "Last Will and Testament, Amended." Gasps spread through the room like wildfire. Vanessa's eyes bulged. "What? No. You didn't change it. You promised I promised nothing," I said quietly, my voice cold as stone. Mr. Harris cleared his throat. This amendment was signed and witnessed 6 months ago. It clearly states that due to repeated misconduct and fraud, Vanessa Bennett and her husband Darren Bennett are disinherited. They have no legal claim to Mrs. Bennett's estate. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, shocked, scandalized, some even thrilled by the drama unfolding. Vanessa's scream tore through it all. "You can't do this to me. I'm your daughter." "Your daughter." I locked eyes with her, my voice low but firm. "A daughter protects her mother. A daughter honors her family. You are no daughter of mine tonight." She staggered back as though struck, her hand clutching the back of a chair for support. Darren muttered curses under his breath, his face drained of color. The guests stared wide-eyed. Ethan looked between his mother and me, his young face pale, but his voice steady when he finally spoke. "Maybe Grandma's the only one in this house who's been honest." The truth landed like thunder. Vanessa sank into her seat. Defeated. Darren buried his face in his hands. I stood taller than I had in years, the documents shining in the light like armor. For once, I wasn't the frail old woman they thought I was. I was the storm they never saw coming. And this storm was far from over. The house was silent again, but this time it wasn't silence born of humiliation. It was the silence of power, the kind that settles after a storm when the trees stand stripped bare and no one dares to move. I stood at the head of the table, my hand resting on the amended will, the papers that had finally spoken the truth I'd carried in my heart for years. I looked at Vanessa, my daughter, the child I had once held through fevers, the little girl I'd braided hair for before school. Her face was streaked with tears and anger twisted by greed into something unrecognizable. And it broke me, not because of what she had done tonight, but because of what she had become. "You called me useless," I said softly, my voice carrying across the stunned room. "Do you know what useless looks like Vanessa useless is? When a person has everything given to them and still wants more. Useless is when someone takes from the very hands that fed them, lies to the very heart that raised them. That's useless." Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. Darren looked down at his lap, unwilling to meet my gaze. I turned to Ethan. His young face was pale, but his eyes burned with something stronger than fear clarity. "And you," I said gently, "you still have time to learn what it means to be useful, to be honorable. It's not about money, Ethan. It's about the way you treat people when no one's watching. That is what lasts." He swallowed hard and nodded. I straightened my voice, rising. "For 72 years, I have carried this family. I worked when your father was gone on the road. I taught other people's children while raising you, Vanessa. I paid bills with hands that ached, cooked meals when I was too tired to stand skip dinners so you could eat seconds. I gave you everything I had." And still my voice cracked, but I forced the words out. You looked me in the eye and said I was nothing. The words hung heavy like smoke that wouldn't clear. I drew in a trembling breath. Being old doesn't mean being useless. It means I've lived long enough to know what really matters. It means I've made mistakes and learned from them. It means I carry scars on my body, on my heart, that prove I survived when others might not have. That is not useless. That is strength. A murmur of agreement moved around the table. Mrs. Carter dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Even the cousins who had sat silent all evening now looked at me with something close to reverence. Vanessa whispered hoarsely, "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," I said, cutting her off gently but firmly. "You meant every word, and those words can never be taken back. But what you do from this moment forward, that will define you, not me." She looked down her shoulders, shaking. I let the silence breathe before I continued. "This house, this family, my life, none of it is for sale. None of it is yours to take. And none of it will ever again be used to make me feel small. I am not small, I am not useless, and I will not be dismissed." For the first time all night, I felt the weight lift completely. My chest expanded, my back straightened. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was claiming what was mine, not just the house, not just the money, but my dignity. The candles on the cake had melted into pools of wax the flames extinguished long ago. But in that moment, I didn't need a wish, because I had finally found my voice. I stayed standing, my palms pressed flat against the oak table, the very same table where I had served countless meals, celebrated birthdays, and patched up skinned knees with bowls of soup and motherly patience. Tonight, it was no longer just furniture, it was my pulpit, my witness stand, my battlefield. "Do you know what respect means?" I asked, scanning the room. No one answered. Respect is not about flowers on Mother's Day or phone calls once in a while. Respect is about how you speak to someone when you're angry. It's about how you treat them when you think they have nothing left to give you. That's when the truth shows. My words hit harder than I expected. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Darren rubbed his temples. Vanessa's chest rose and fell, her tears staining the front of her blouse. I turned my gaze back to her. "Vanessa, I didn't hide money to hurt you. I hid it to protect myself, because I knew this day might come, and when it did, I wanted to be ready. Not with revenge, but with proof that your cruelty didn't erase who I am." Her lips trembled. I thought you didn't trust me." I shook my head slowly. "No. I knew I couldn't trust the person you had become. There's a difference." The words broke something in her. She sagged in her chair, her body folding inward like a house collapsing. For once, she had no venom left. I looked at Darren next. "You call yourself a husband, but a real husband wouldn't let his wife dig herself into this hole. You stood by and let her ruin herself, and you tried to profit from it. That makes you worse than her, Darren. She acted out of greed, but you acted out of cowardice." He flinched as though I'd struck him, his eyes darting toward the door. Finally, I looked back at Ethan. "You are young. You still have time to choose who you'll be. Remember this night. Remember the look on your mother's face, the shame in this room. Let it teach you that money is nothing if it costs you your soul. Do not repeat their mistakes." The boy nodded solemnly, his jaw tight, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. I drew in a deep breath and let it out slowly. I've carried this family for 73 years. Tonight I lay it down. I will not beg for love. I will not beg for respect. From now on, if you want a place at this table, you will earn it not through blood, but through honor." The words echoed in the stillness. Mrs. Carter sniffled, whispering amen under her breath. A cousin muttered, "She's right," and others nodded murmurs of agreement, swelling like a tide. For the first time, I wasn't the one they pitied. I was the one they listened to. Vanessa buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving with quiet sobs. Darren sat stiff, his face hard, his pride cracked, but not broken. Ethan stared at me with wide, searching eyes as if trying to memorize every word. I rested my hand on the papers one last time. Old age is not uselessness. It is survival. It is wisdom. And tonight, it is my weapon. I pushed the documents back into Mr. Harris's hands. "Keep them safe. They've done their job." He gave me a small nod. I looked around the room one last time. "This is the truth. Whether you like it or not, it stands." And with that, I sat down, my body aching, but my spirit finally free. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. The air in the room was thick, heavy with truth and consequences. For the first time all night, I thought the battle was finished. My daughter had been exposed, her husband disgraced, and my dignity restored. Mr. Harris gathered the scattered papers, sliding them neatly back into his briefcase. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but steady, ready for the evening to finally end. But then he hesitated. His hand hovered over the briefcase latch. His brow furrowed as if he were weighing something silently. "Mrs. Bennet," he said slowly, "there is one final matter." My stomach dropped. Final matter? He reached into the side compartment of the case and withdrew a small sealed envelope, cream-colored with a heavy red wax seal pressed onto its flap. The seal caught the light, glinting ominously. Gasps rustled through the guests. Vanessa lifted her head, eyes swollen, but suddenly alert like a fox catching the scent of prey. Darren straightened in his chair, his earlier defeat momentarily forgotten. Even Ethan leaned forward, curiosity sparking in his young eyes. What is that?" I asked, my voice unsteady. Mr. Harris set the envelope carefully on the table, away from the cake, away from the glasses, as though it were something fragile or dangerous. "This was entrusted to me by your late husband before he passed. He instructed me to deliver it only under very specific circumstances." My breath caught. My husband, Mr. Harris, nodded. Yes. He anticipated there might come a day when family loyalty would be tested. He prepared this envelope for that day. The room froze, every sound, swallowed by the weight of his words. I stared at the envelope as if it might burn through the tablecloth. Vanessa spoke first, her voice hoarse, but hungry. "Open it. If Dad left something, it's ours to know." I whipped my head toward her, anger surging. "You have no right." Mr. Harris cleared his throat. "For clarity, this envelope is not addressed to you, Mrs. Bennett, nor to your daughter." He let that hang for a beat. "It is addressed to someone else." The whispers exploded again. Darren muttered, "What the hell does that mean?" Ethan's eyes darted from the envelope to me, wide and uncertain. I reached out my fingers, trembling as they hovered over the red seal. My heart pounded in my chest, louder than the storm that had just passed in this room. A part of me wanted to tear it open immediately to finally know what secrets my husband had left behind. Another part of me feared what truth might be waiting inside another betrayal, another revelation, another fracture in a family already broken. The guests leaned forward breathless. Vanessa gripped the table edge, her knuckles white. Darren's jaw tightened. Ethan whispered, barely audible, "Grandma, what if it's for me?" The thought hit me like lightning. The envelope sat there, sealed and silent, daring me to open it. I pulled my hand back, the weight of choice pressing down harder than any insult ever had. I looked at Mr. Harris, my voice barely steady. "Not tonight." His nod was slow understanding. He slipped the envelope back into his case, locking it with a metallic snap. The room erupted in murmurs, questions, speculation. Everyone wanted to know. Everyone wanted the secret. But for now, it would remain just that, a secret. And as I looked around at the faces burning with curiosity, I realized the battle wasn't finished. Not yet, because one sealed envelope still had the power to unravel everything. So here I am, 73 years old, standing taller than I have in decades, yet holding on to one secret that could change everything, the envelope my husband left behind. I don't know what's inside or who it's truly meant for. Maybe it's salvation, maybe it's destruction. But one thing I do know, my story isn't finished. And now I want to ask you, if your own child called you useless, would you fight back or stay silent? Would you open that envelope or would you wait? Tell me what you would do in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to know what happens when that seal finally breaks, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with me for the next chapter. Because sometimes the truth isn't the end. It's only the beginning.